Good morning, everyone. I'm Marty Oberman. I am recently have become chairman of the board of Metra, and we are here today for our regular monthly meeting. The board made a decision a few months ago that we were going to take our monthly board meetings on a fairly predictable basis to each of our 6 constituent county members of Metra. I think it's very important that we come to your territory from time to time, so those who want to watch what we do or talk to us directly don't have to come all the way into the city. So I am delighted, and our Will County board member, Jack Pargolo, undertook to make these arrangements and to convince the county board to let us have this room. I believe it's no rent. If not, it's now no rent, because I just said so. But we are really delighted. They've made it so convenient and easy for us to come out here and have our meeting. Before we get underway, we obviously have to call our roll, and then we'll be underway. So, Ms. Murphy, would you call the roll, please?
Director Barbosa. Director Brown. Present. Director Carlson.
Present.
Director Grant.
Present.
Director Mulder. Present. Director Monaretto.
Present.
Director Carlo.
Present.
Director Plant.
Present.
Director Reeves. Director Zedek.
Present.
Chairman Overman.
Present. All right, we will now recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So I want to, before we get underway, let me say a few things, particularly to my fellow board members. All of these microphones are on all the time. So if you have a snide comment to make to your seatmate, be sure you turn your head aside. I'm probably guilty of violating that myself. We have a number of important preliminary matters. First, I would like to acknowledge a number of officials of Will County who are present here with us today. If you'd all either stand or wave, I'm going to read off your names. The Will County Clerk, Nancy Boots.
Good morning.
There she is. And we have several county board members. Denise Winfrey. Good morning. Don Moran. Don Gould. Good morning. We have the Will County RTA board member, J.D. Ross, and the Joliet City Manager, Jim Hock. There he is. Okay, thank you. And last but not least, we have the Speaker of the Will County Board who actually wanted to say a few words to us, Herb Brooks.
Thank you.
There he is.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, one of the things they did not tell you when they introduced me is that my full-time job, I'm a minister. So if I go on too long, you might have to pull my coattail. That's how we do it in church.
We have a rule, but we may waive it.
Okay. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Will County Board, our County Executive Larry Walsh, I would like to welcome you all to Will County and thank you for coming to the Will County City of Joliet for your meeting on this morning. Will County is one of the fastest growing counties in the state of Illinois. Many of our residents take Metra to and from work in the Chicago metro area. I personally like to take it whenever I travel around the state of Illinois because the gas is cheaper than my automobile. The reliability and frequency of your service is just as important for Will County residents as it is for the residents of every metro area that you currently serve. Speaking for the Will County Board, we hope that your planning for the future takes this into account and proactively address the transit needs to our constituents here in Will County. Thank you very much for making this trip to the City of Joliet, and we appreciate the opportunity to participate in your meeting today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We much appreciate it. Two matters of, first of all, I think the record should reflect that Director Barbosa is now here. So I think just a roll call, but we know you were well intended. And you weren't on a Metra train, so that can't be yours. The two personal Metra board matters before we start public comment. One is, although we sent her off in a flourish of accolades at our last meeting, one of our board members is still here because her replacement hasn't been confirmed yet, and she will be forever responsible to do her duty. But I suspect this is your actual last meeting. So I would like us all to acknowledge Arlene Mulder, who is here, but we'll see you, but not in a voting role. And as one leaves, one comes in, and this is the first official meeting of our newest board member representing McHenry County, Mark Munaretto. And tradition has it to ask the new board member to say a few words if you're so inclined. Mark?
That's a noisy microphone. Thank you, Chairman Overman. I just wanted to take this opportunity to thank my appointing authority in McHenry County for choosing me over 11 candidates who competed for this position. I'm excited about my role here on the board, and I'm hopeful that I can make a difference. And I'm looking forward to working with you, Chairman Overman, and my fellow board members. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. And be careful what you ask for, because I got a lot of assignments on mine for you. With that, the very first order of business is the time for public comments. We have two people signed up for public comments. John Joliet. John? There. You want to, is there an appropriate microphone? Oh, you want to come over to the podium? Okay.
Correct. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, everybody else here, good morning. I am John Grueling. I'm President and CEO of the Will County Center for Economic Development. The CED is a private nonprofit business development corporation, and our mission is to support existing business expansion and new business recruitment. To that end, we are strong proponents of investment in transportation infrastructure to serve both the needs of our business and industries and our working residents. Support for projects like the I-355 extension and the Iliana Expressway reflect that commitment. We are also supporters of improved and increased transit service throughout Will County and fully supported the RTA sales tax increase legislation. The reasons for this support are readily apparent. Will County has been the fastest growing of the Chicago metro counties for the last 15 years. Will County's population has more than doubled, adding 360,000 residents between 1990 and 2014. Our CMAP is projecting that our population will grow to over 1.2 million people. That would make us the second largest county in Illinois by 2040. Over 38,000 businesses currently call Will County home. Today, Will County is the largest inland port in North America, and we handle over 3 million international containers in our 2 intermodal yards. The logistics industry alone will add 25,000 jobs to our economy over the next 15 to 20 years, and many will want to take public transit to their jobs. Metra currently provides direct commuter train service to only eight of Will County's 37 municipalities: Orland Park, Tinley Park, University Park, Mokina, New Lenox, Manhattan, Lockport, and Joliet. A new Metra station in Romeoville is expected to be open for business, hopefully sometime in 2016. Metra's Heritage Corridor line, which operates between Joliet Union Station and Chicago Union Station, has by far the least amount of train frequencies of any of Metra's 11 service corridors. 3 weekly morning inbound trains and 3 weekday evening outbound trains. We know Metra understands the need for additional train frequencies on this line and the challenges that we all have with the Canadian National Railway and not allowing more Metra trains on that line unless substantial track capacity improvements are made. We applaud Mr. Orsino's, is that right? Orsino's? I'm sorry. Work with the CN to operate at least 2 additional lines on the Heritage Corridor. Metra's long-range plans call for establishing the proposed southeast service line from downtown Chicago to Crete and Balmoral Park in eastern Will County. We support this project. In addition, we also supported the now apparently defunct Star Line and wish that would come back to life. I want to thank Metra for holding your board meeting in Will County today. Certainly a big Will County welcome, as you heard from the speaker. Know that the businesses in Will County want to work with you to improve Metra service to our business and residents. We look forward to a mutually beneficial future. Thank you.
Mr. Bruning, thank you very much. The next and second speaker is Jamal Powell.
Yes.
Powell. Okay. While he's on his way down here, let me comment briefly to what the speaker's remarks were. Rest assured, although he could not be here today, he had an unbreakable commitment. Brian Reeves, who is a board member from Lamont, along with Jack Farnlow and Don DeGraff, are very vigorous champions of all of the service improvements that you talked about right here on the board. For those of us who are from other parts of the 6-county region, we are never allowed to forget those issues because they bring them up all the time. So we're all on the same page on that, I think. Mr. Powell.
Yes, my name is Jamal Powell. I live in University Park, and before I get to my comment, it was interesting Mr. Grueling was talking about mass transit, because to get to this meeting I had to go into part of South Cook County to get back out here. So I certainly know the challenges of getting to certain parts of Will County from one end to the other. But with that being said, what I'm here to talk about is I noticed that Metra decided to make a couple tweaks to its electric district schedule. And after having someone go through it with me, I noticed something rather unusual about one of the trains. I refer to a train that leaves Millennium Station at 6:08 p.m. It used to get to University Park at 7:08. Now I notice it got pushed back to University Park at 7:12. And then when I had someone go further through the details, it said it left Richard Park at 7:05, getting to University Park at 7:12. And I'm curious to know why the 7-minute dichotomy between Richardson and University Park, given the fact that as a frequent user of that line, I know it doesn't take 7 minutes to get between those two stops. I found that rather interesting. And I also found it interesting for a train that leaves downtown at 7:47 a.m. rather. I think it's train number 111. And it used to get to University Park at 8:50, but now, according to the new schedule, it's 8:53. I guess what I'm trying to figure out is how did they determine those end times?
I'm going to ask our Deputy Executive Director and Operations, Chief Feats Wolfer, to answer your question, Mr. Paul.
Thank you.
So, Jamal, what we occasionally do is we look at our on-time performance and we try to reflect what our trains are realistically doing as far as performance. Okay. Those two trains you spoke of, the 608 departure train 139 and 111, historically was not able to keep the schedule at University Park. So often not reportable delay of 6 minutes or more, but usually 3 or 4 minutes behind the schedule. When that happens, and we have an opportunity to make some changes on schedules, we will add that additional time at the last station, because in most cases, it just was not able to keep the schedule. And what we like to do is we like to reflect what we're actually doing on our schedule so folks can schedule their needs accordingly. So that's why those two trains were adjusted.
Okay, thank you, sir. I was just curious about that, but thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Powell.
Okay.
All right, the next item is approval of the minutes of the last meeting. Are there any corrections?
Correction.
John?
Okay, I do have a correction. That would be on page 22, with the resolution regarding the federal transportation funding. Yep.
For those who are new to a Metra board meeting, the fact that we have to go to page 22 should give you some idea how detailed our meeting. Where are you, Jim?
I'm on page 22, number 20.
Yes.
All right. Essentially, the sixth line down, it should be willing. The question is if they're willing to pass a 4-year or 6-year authorization. All right. And then the line below that, the industry would like to see a 3 to 8 year authorization.
The woman insert the words to see after like.
Yes. And the words to pass after willing.
Are those the only two changes?
Those are my only two.
I guess we need a motion to approve the, to amend before we move. We need a, do you want to move, make a motion to amend?
Be happy to move to approve the amendment.
Second.
So do we only need one roll call then? All right, all in favor of approving the minutes with the amendment suggested by Director Plant? It's a voice vote, I guess. We don't need a roll call. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. The minutes are approved. Now we are moving along to the consent agenda. Items 2 through 8. Are there any board members who wish to remove an item from the consent agenda? Don?
I think it might be advisable just to pull out 2A1A, A1, 2A1.
A1.
Just a professional service contract, because it's a sole source, maybe just a brief explanation.
Okay.
Break that.
Any others? I'm sorry, Jack, say it again.
Page 5.
The, under 3, under real estate contracts, number 5? Yes. Okay. All right. Any others? And 8. And 8. Any others? All right, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda except for the 3 items that have been removed?
So moved.
Second.
You have to call the roll.
Director Barbosa.
Aye.
Director Brown. Aye. Director Carlson.
Aye.
Director Grab.
Aye.
Director Mulder. Aye. Director Monaretto.
Aye.
Director Carlo.
Aye.
Director Plant.
Aye.
Director Reeves. Director Zerker.
Aye.
Chairman Overman.
Aye.
Chairman Overman, motion carries with 10 ayes.
All right, thank you. So we move to item A1, professional services contract for revenue accounting system.
Yeah, it's maybe, AST obviously is our provider, and considering it's a sole source, I thought it might be good just to have a brief explanation, not necessarily a complete breakdown of the million two, but talking about economically, what makes these services economically procurable, and the fact that obviously the need for what we're about to do here regarding credit cards and debit cards and payment through gateway is important. But maybe you could share some light as to how that million two is constituted.
Okay, there are 3 significant pieces of under, can you hear me?
Could everybody speak into their mics a little bit? Yeah, a little closer.
Okay, sorry, I'm not very good with mics, you can tell.
Much better.
There are 3 big sections of software that run our revenue management system. One is the underlying database structure itself, where all the data is stored in-house. One is the actual point of sale application and all the modules that are encompassed in that. And then the third piece is our reporting environment. where we can see how all the tickets are broken down. We can see by line, by ticket type, by day. Those 3 sections are, it's really a lot of software, and all 3 of those are out of date in terms of current revisions, and we need to get them all to a current revision of the software to maintain the Oracle provided support for those, and also to be able to add on the capabilities necessary for both the contactless cards and then down the road the mobile ticketing.
Roughly what percentage of those 3 main categories constitute the million two? Is it prorated a certain way?
Don, you need to speak into
It's-
the microphone too.
It's a, let me see, so between the database, I'd have to go look exactly, but the database software itself is probably 30%, and the application is probably another 30 to 40, and then the reporting pieces is like about 30 to a little bit less than that.
And you're very comfortable with the fact that these are marketable prices. When you deal with a sole source, you can decision provider, you want to make sure that the million two is money well spent in these particular
Yes,
sections.
the rates being charged for the labor for the project for this based on the amount of effort required, the number of hours required, the type of technical skills required are effectively marketplace rates. They are not.
What's going to be required for us to get concurrence the RTA? And how does that work in terms of the overall dollar amount that council will get?
So the RTA has agreed that this goes under the ICE funding because it does support the I forgot the common fair, I forgot the exact name of it, the intergovernmental fair approach. So because this is getting us to a platform that we can then integrate with the CTA on local ticketing, move this down the line, and will get us to the contactless cards, which is what was first required by the legislation, that RTA has agreed this can be in the ICE funding goal, which is how this particular effort is funded.
So the concurrence, is there some kind of manner in which they determine concurrence then? What determine, how do they?
So I was going to say, Lynette may be able to tell you better about the funding. I know we got to sign off by the RTA, but that's the end of that.
Yeah. So it's ICE funded, and we have about $4.9 million between ICE and Metra match, an 80-20 match on the ICE funding for regional fairs. And one of the components that we've talked about, and I talked about it at the last board meeting, is the change out of the contactless readers. In order to support that, we do all of the upgrades. So working with the RTA, they have agreed that that falls underneath the regional pot. The concurrence is purely formality of us getting through the project and making sure that they check all of the boxes that they need to in order for the funding to come to us.
It's more of a housekeeping formality.
It's housekeeping. It's not anything beyond that. We have assurances that they're going to fund that out of ICE.
Lynette, for the benefit of our Will County friends who don't come to these meetings, would you ensure you just identify yourself so people know who you are, not just people walking off the street?
I did take the train down.
Extraordinary knowledge, I might add.
Sure. Lynette Civarella, Senior Division Director of Strategic Capital Planning for Metra.
And I'm Sherry Kaiser, and I'm the CIO.
Yes, okay. I knew that. Okay, thank you. So, any other questions on this item? Okay, thank you. So we now move to item number 5. Is that Liz? No, Liz is going to come up here and cross-examine. Liz, you want to identify yourself?
Yes, hi, my name is Liz Flood. I'm Assistant Deputy General Counsel at Metra, and this is one of my staff members.
My name's Edward Leonard. I'm an Associate General Counsel for Metra.
Jack.
Okay, I don't know if I needed 2 lawyers for this. There were some
You're
questions.
only billing at half the rate.
There were some questions I had on the suburban mass transit district and their relationship with ours. I thought maybe a little bit of an explanation might help. Specifically, who owns the cars? Do they own it? Do we own it? The 3 years in between, this all wraps around an accident in 2011. So it's taken 3 years for whatever happened to happen. And the third part of it is, the 2 new cars, were they purchased somewhere? Does somebody maintain an inventory of these cars? Where do they come from?
I'm going to answer the first two questions and defer the third to Jim Dubinsky. The WSMTD owns the cars. The WSMTD leases those cars and approximately 76 others to the BN. The BN then subleases those cars to Metra. And so that is the chain. Now, the holdup as far as reimbursement is concerned, we did get cars immediately back into service. And I think that's the important factor from a reserve that Metra had. However, we have been discussing among the insurance companies exactly the level of recovery that we, Metra, should receive for supplying the new cars. Whether they should be based on a used car basis or they should be used on a replacement value. They should be replaced on a replacement value. So technically at this point, and Suzanne, please jump in if you need to clarify. Technically, we have recovered all the sums from the insurers with the exception of our deductible. And now we're going after Amtrak's insurer to replace our deductible. And that is where the holdup has occurred.
Okay. The 3 years in between, 11 to 14, did we do without 2 cars in that period of time?
No, and Jim is going to answer that question further for you.
Jim Dewinski, mechanical. The cars are really just our fleet cars that are being transferred to the WSMTD for their loss. So our fleet did go down 2 cars. There are no new cars purchased in this action.
Okay, so there's just damages.
Yes, and we assessed the age of the cars that were damaged and basically gave them replacement cars, similar age and value.
That's all I have on it.
Okay. Any other questions on this issue? Okay. Thank you, Liz. You might as well stay up here because I hope you're on for item number 8 as well, which is the crossing and interlocking agreement for the Joliet Intermodal Project, appropriately being considered all in Joliet. Jack?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions on this also. Namely, when I look at it, it seems like we are relinquishing some control in the trackage of connections to the interlocker. And I think by and large that's good because the whole project is a good thing for the Joliet area. However, I always worry about any relinquishing of control down the road. Is this going to be a future problem of any kind?
No, this will not be a future problem for us. We've worked very hard with the BN and the UP to come to an agreement. We will no longer cross the interlocking at Joliet. However, if we do expand service and need to go beyond that, we will be able to do it. Operationally, we have safeguards in there for both carriers, so we won't be getting delays. It's actually a win-win for everybody. It will be much better for our customers. It's a huge customer enhancement to have a new facility, and also the Heritage Corridor that comes across there, the platforms there. So we will, it really is a win-win situation. We worked really very hard to come to this agreement, but it did not impair our ability to grow. It also has, we've been safeguarded, for control opportunities also.
There's also some points about the cost and the maintenance cost and this 14.85% number that we're going to absorb from somewhere. We're going to pay for that. How does that stack up with the expense that we're losing? He says there's no fiscal impact, but there obviously is some fiscal impact.
The amount of money we pay now with all of the operators that it takes to maintain and the things that we have to do with the shared cost to go across the diamond, through this agreement, we've been able to come to an agreement based on what we call the REMA standards, which are standard rates for working on certain items. And those are the signal units that we have that we're going to be that we will be using for our service. This is a much lesser amount for us than what we currently pay.
Is that the interlocking protocols?
When you say the interlocking protocol, I'm not sure I understand. This
So
agreement,
that's what the cost was going to be based on, right?
the cost is going to be based on being able to service the units, and they call them signal units, and there are certain standards that are standard in the industry through the REMA standards, it's the engineering standards, and it's all based on that. So it's not what one person may think is more valuable than the other. It's a basic standard grade protocol. But the total dollar amount is much less than Metra's going to have to pay because of the massive amount of use of the interlock.
Is that it?
That's it.
Any other questions? Okay. Those were the only 3 items. Is there a motion to approve those 3 items?
So moved.
Second. Leave to apply the same roll call?
Leave.
Okay. The next item is item number 9. Bruce, you want to step up here and tell us about, identify yourself?
Good morning. My name is Bruce Marchese. I'm the Chief Engineering Officer at Metra. Back in May, near the end of May, a mechanical department employee had contacted the engineering department because they had discovered several bricks laying at the base of the building at 47th Street, which is the diesel shop, on the loading dock floor. So when we were notified of that situation, we sent out a team to investigate just what was going on. And in fact, we did find several bricks laying at the base of the building. So after we saw that, we decided to go up on top of the building and see what the cause was. Once we got to the top of the building, we realized, we discovered that there was about a 10-foot section of bricks that had crumbled off and several had fallen off over the side onto the loading dock and also fallen back onto the roof. What we feel caused this was the roof member was attached to a flashing, which was then attached to the parapet wall on the top of the roof. And we believe that due to age, because this roof is that parapet was built in, I believe, 1953, and high winds, the way it was attached to the flashing and to the parapet, constant vibration seemed to have loosened up the mortar. Some of the mortar joints broke away, some of the bricks crumbled, and that's what caused it to fall over. So when we discovered that, we determined it was an emergency situation because of the chance of more bricks falling off where employees are walking about in the yard at 47th Street. We solicited a contract or a bid with IHC, Illinois Hydraulics, who we have on contract right now, who do similar types of work, to come out and do emergency work to get the situation at least temporarily taken care of. What they did was they went up, they did a full inspection, and they determined that on the wall itself, the west wall where it actually came off, it was about 50 feet in length, but only about 10 feet was in jeopardy at that point. So they took off the remaining bricks that looked like they could potentially fall. They cleaned it up. They put some more mortar in there to patch it, to put a temporary fix on, and they attached the roof member, because when the roof member also tore away, there was a slight gap between the wall and the roof, and a slight leak was going down into the diesel shop. The water went during a rainstorm. So they were able to secure the roof down, and instead of attaching it back to the parapet to stay away from more vibration causing any more damage, they put sandbags to weigh it down. So we feel this fix is good for about another at least 2 years, and we are going to have a consultant come out, do a full assessment. We assessed it ourselves, but we're going to have a full assessment by another consultant, do the whole roof at 47th Street and 49th Street. Because of their age, they're both in that same range, and then we'll get it permanently repaired.
Any questions? John?
Quick question. Do we have a property inspection program that might get us ahead of this before they start falling?
Well, up to then, we did not. We are now. This brought something to our, we physically see things, they look okay, but you never know sometimes underneath because this was underneath the roof member, no one would ever thought it would happen. So what we're doing is we have several masonry structures that we're looking at right now. So when this consultant comes on board, we're going to do a full assessment of all of the masonry structures.
Good.
Any other questions? I would say of our $10 billion state of good repair needs, this has got to be the smallest component of that, and I'm all for it. I wish we could solve all of them for 40,000. Do we need to vote on this? We do. Is there a motion to approve this? Second. Arlene? Second. Same roll call, leave to apply?
Leave.
Okay. Item Bruce. Thank you, Bruce. All right, we now have a number of items to receive and file, which I'll just read off. And then you can tell me if anybody wants to question or comment on them. Item 10 is our corporate website activity report. 11, the monthly management report. 12 is capital procurements of under 100,000. 13, operating procurements under 100,000. 14, our Office of Business Diversity and Civil Rights monthly report. 15, our on-time performance report for May. 16, our ridership report for May. 17, preliminary revenues for May. And 18, our monthly legislative report. Does any member have any comments or questions on any of these items? All right, they will be received and filed. Next, it is time for Mr. Wolfer's State of Metra Operations.
There was one thing.
All right, I'm sorry, John.
Sorry. Part of number 18, I would just like to remind everybody, we're at 14 days. You know, barring, if it happened on my way out here this morning, God bless them, but I don't know that we've got a conference agreement on the gas tax yet. So it's getting to the point where they're going to have to start scaling back.
It's going to affect everybody in the transportation business, including us. So if you have any influence in Washington beyond what's already been weighed in on, call somebody to fix that, or we're going to be in trouble. Thank you, John. Pete, your Metra Operations report.
Thank you. Before we begin, I just want to note that as I go through this report, we're going to see some statistics concerning the BNSF as we did them previous month. As everybody remembers that attended, we had BNSF officials that explained some of the performance issues from the month of May and what was actually happening in June at the time of the board meeting. Mr. Orsino and I met with some officials, high-level officials from the BNSF July 1st. They came in with a plan that was actually implemented, and we are now seeing the positive results for the month of July. When I'm done with my report today, DJ Mitchell, a BNSF official, will come up. He has some comments and can answer maybe some specific questions concerning BNSF. So just keep that in mind as I go through this report. I appreciate it. Thank you. We finished the month of June with an on-time performance of 93.3. Of our delays for the month, 49% were between 6 and 10 minutes. An additional 21% were fewer than 16 minutes. Actually, compared to last year, we're up in the weekday categories and down just 1% higher in 2014. The major delay occurrences in June were, I'm going to give the good news story first. Weather delays for the month of June, we had 66 system-wide. June was somewhat of a challenging weather month, but I don't think as difficult as the previous year. However, in 2013 in June, we had 234 delays. The UP this month, 2014, only had 29 weather delays. Last year in June, they had 132. I believe the 8 ANA monitors that were installed have made a huge difference, and that is the BNSF put in a couple years ago has made a big difference. So that is a good news story. Bad news story, freight. We had 183 delays this month, 115 in June. 41 of those were on the BNSF and 30 were on the Southwest Service. As I've discussed, and we'll hear a little bit more, track construction was also bad news this month. There were 234 delays compared to 82 in June of 2013. 161 of those were track construction. construction delays on the BNSF. Here is a line-by-line breakdown of on-time performance. The peak period on-time performance for the system was 94.1. And before I bring DJ Mitchell up from the BNSF, if there's any questions?
Question, Pete. On the Metra signal and switch delays, is there a significant number at A2?
On June 30th, let me get my stats out. On June 30th, we had a A2 situation that affected several railroads. I don't know if I can dig up the stats right now, but that was, let me just see real quick here.
Well, you don't need to get the exact numbers, but there was a significant number of these delays that we were A2.
That affected North Central, the UP West Line, and Milwaukee North Line. Milwaukee West Line, I'm sorry.
Actually, John, go ahead.
Pete, on the track construction, of the 234 delays, how many were BNSF?
161.
How long do we expect that to go on?
That's actually been rectified. The BN is just under 95%. They've actually, since our meeting that we had with Don, the plan was already implemented. We've shared that letter with a breakdown of what that meeting consisted of, which included all the BNSF changes they've made. Their operation has been extremely consistent since then. There was one incident, it was a human error a couple days ago that resulted in, I think, 14 delays, but for the most part, freight, track construction are down to a minimum.
Pete, if we can go ahead and ask DJ to come up and talk about, some of the things that they are doing to rectify this and how they got their arms around it, I think that will answer a lot of the questions. DJ, would you mind coming up and showing us?
Before, while he's on his way up here, maybe this is part of the same thing that Norm was asking about, but if you look at the line by line on time, it looks like the Milwaukee district lines, the west and north and north central, they were all significantly below, down in the 90% range. Are those all caused by A2 problems, essentially?
No, that's part of it. There's freight.
Well, why are those, as our Milwaukee district, running so significantly below the sort of system average there, leaving aside the
Well, if we go back to June 30th, the last day of the month, we actually had on Milwaukee North Line 20 delays on that day alone, and those were due to signal issues at A2, and then actually where we crossed the CN and Graves Lake, that was another issue that affected both the North Central and the CN. On the West Line, let's see, we had freight interference at B12 and B17. There were 7 delays there on the 27th. And then those delays from June 30th at A2 that caused 6 delays on the Milwaukee West Line as well. On the North Central, we had 17 delays due to switch and signal failure. That's the CN Railroad. Now we've improved for this month of July, but that's a constant challenge.
So those 17 delays alone knocked the North Central down to the 90%?
Contributed. And that's a district where we run, yes, per day and no weekend service. So after 2 delays, they're below 95% for a day.
If I can also add one thing on the North Line, I just want to remind everybody from Outpost 32 roundup, Outpost 50, the single track railroad. So anytime you have a delay, like let's say you get a delay on one of your trains, you get delays all night long because there's nowhere for these trains to be able to fix the railroad. It just progresses all night long. That's one of the issues that we're looking at, trying to build out that railroad with some additional sidings in and see what we see. So there's no other thing that's just a part of the capital.
Marty, I became aware of a situation because of Canadian Pacific interference at Spalding that was affecting our
trains at Bartlett and Elgin, and Pete, Marty, Ryan, and I got our heads together, and they have jumped all over that problem. And I also made mention of it to Manny Barbosa, so that he understood what was going on there. But CP got a practice going that was not in our interest, and we have dealt with that as well, hopefully, so that the number of interferences on the west line should be cut down.
And one other issue on the actual north line, we had 2 days, June 12th and June 19th. We had 2 engine breakdowns on those 2 days that caused 13 delays total.
So that's the line that had 2 breakdowns?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. It's all yours. DN.
Good afternoon, or good morning, actually. I'm DJ Mitchell, Assistant Vice President, Passenger Operations for the DNSF. Mr. Chairman and Board, I'm happy to be here to give you all an update as to what Pete referred to as our plan. Internally, we call it our containment plan. We're trying to contain the delays so we don't lead the parade in the wrong way. This plan was put together in June toward the end of the month, around the 23rd, and I know you were told about it. Before I go into what we've done since then, I'd like to take a look at the 3 big categories of delays. June, July, freight train interference, our numbers, and they're very close to what Pete would say because we match. 66 in that 2-month period, we're only at 11 month to date. Maintenance away work, both switch failures and maintenance away work itself. In the May-June period, it was 148. This month is 12. And then locomotive failures, the May-June period again was 47. This month it's 1. So we've seen some significant improvement in our on-time performance during the month of July, even with all the work that continues. Now, the containment plan that was referenced a moment ago actually should be broken down into 4 categories: personnel, management, planning, and capital investments. Let me go through each one of those. We committed at the time when we talked to Mr. Orsino that we would do the following things. We would add mechanical responders in the field during the rush hour. We've done so. We committed to adding a road foreman engine person who would be responsible for overseeing the engineers. We have posted that position. We've added an officer, what we call an exempt, a temporary exempt, in our network operations center in Fort Worth to oversee the rush hour period here in Chicago, and that is done. We've added an outside train master at Cicero. That is indeed done. Outside train master is very important because as we move both the passenger trains and the freight trains, we need to make sure we have a landing spot for the freight trains, and that person is coordinating that. Second, track inspector. We have added that person to all the inspection moves up and down the track. That's important as well because now that we have 2 people, one person is looking as to where they are, what the safety rules are, what's around them. The other person says, stop, I want to take a look at this problem and this problem, and it's added a great deal of accuracy and persnicketyness to the way we've been reporting these the problems we've got with maintenance away and the condition of the track. New road foreman has for engine and or train master, that position has been posted. We've added the switch inspection gang. Actually, that started before this. We have that gang in place, and they are doing their work accordingly. And lastly, a new roadmaster position has been posted. So of the 8 activities under personnel, 5 are done, and 3 personnel activities are posted. With respect to management, 2 are finished, 1 has started. We have briefed our Chicago Command Center, where we coordinate the freight and the passenger service here in Chicago, with the cardinal sins that they should never violate in the operation of the commuter service. There are 3. There is allow 3 tracks at Laramie near Cicero, allow 2 tracks at Eola, and don't have freight trains anyplace other than around Naperville as we stage things. Do not do those things. And in fact, that's indeed what they're doing now. And when they made a mistake, and they made a few, even the last month, we have coached and counseled, that's our phrase, the people who were involved and made sure that they understood that that should not be done. Terminal superintendent, who is a senior officer above our managers, was responsible for the entire Chicago subdivision operation from Eola into Chicago. He has actually participated in managing the rush hour from the glass house in Chicago, as opposed to being in Cicero, as opposed to being out in Eola. He's been down at the glass house. That helps a great deal in the communication between the freight and the passenger side. And lastly, we have put in place an enhanced communication plan between our maintenance wing people and our transportation people. That frankly has started. I'm not altogether satisfied with it. That's work in progress, but we'll get there. Planning. There are 8 areas there, 5 done and 3 have started, but they're more longer term. We have instituted a two-call process, one at 15 minutes after 1 o'clock in the morning and one at 1:30 in the afternoon, to make sure that all the manager in the command center plus all the field forces understands what is coming at us so they can plan accordingly. And there's a very important theme. I'm going to touch on that several times. We have put in place at our command center a new computer program that better estimates train arrival and train departure times. And then the third thing, we have looked at the roles and responsibilities of those people in the command center and redefined those. And frankly, I'm looking at their job descriptions myself to make sure that they're looking at the world not only in the short term, but 17 hours out. And that's why I say this planning process is so important, because what we found was that the managers were actually doing what they ought to be doing. The trouble is they weren't looking far enough out. And so instead of looking 3 hours out, 4 hours out, we said, look, you have to look out 17 hours out. You have to look at what's happening in Minneapolis and St. Paul. You have to look at what's happening in Kansas City. And you have to look at what's happening in Galesburg. That's 163 miles from here. When you get all those pieces together, then you've got a plan. And that's what they've been doing, and that's frankly why the freight interference number has gone down as much as it has. Joint Maintenance Away Transportation Work Plan. That is a plan that's being developed right now so that our maintenance away people coordinate with our transportation people so that we know exactly what's coming up. So during the course of the summer, we've got some rail relay, we've got some tie work. We know what that is, where it's going to be done, why it's going to be done, and how long it's going to take. And very shortly, we're going to start our winter planning plan. So that sometime well before it gets frost on pumpkin around here, we will have that done and in place. And we'll obviously share it with Pete and Tom. Turnout replacement plan is related to that. We're looking at all the interlockings. We have 12 of them now. We throw switches in this territory in order to accomplish rush hour 700 times. We're taking a look at all of our turnouts, make sure that they're in good order, and to the extent they're not, either it's a maintenance issue or it's a capital replacement issue. And we'll have that plan done shortly. The interchange with other carriers, primarily the eastern carriers, primarily the CSX, we have actually caused some of those trains to be rerouted out of the metropolitan area, and we've changed what we call the transportation service plan so that when they do come here, because they have to, we handle those more expeditiously. We've taken a look at the off-peak schedules, and we're thinking about the peak hour schedules for the commuter service. We have a temporary construction schedule in place right now to accommodate the Downers Grove Main Street work that is being done on the platforms. And lastly, something that Mr. Orsino has probably not talked to you about, but I would suggest you ought to know about, is his personal involvement in the Chicago Planning Group's work to take a look at how the switching district is managing itself. I'm a member of the CPG, that's what we call ourselves. And we have been assigned by the freight executives to come up with a better operating theory, philosophy, plan, not short-term, not tactical, but strategic. And it's not capital either, it's how we manage the flow of traffic in and out. And Don has been at the table, Pete's been at the table. This is a longer-term effort. But as we go forward with this, it's going to be very important to Metra and Amtrak both, because as we wrap our mind around how we're handling the significant increase in freight traffic through Chicago, which has its good side, we need to make sure that we coordinate that operation, whether it be capital or operating, with the passenger services, Metra and Amtrak. And Don has been at the table at those meetings on a regular basis with personal involvement, and I trust and hope that he will continue, frankly, because he has a very good perspective. Last is capital. Last because it's relatively small, frankly. I don't know that many people know, but IDOT is funding the construction of 5 staging tracks at Eola. They are in the process of executing that contract to begin construction right now. People said that wouldn't happen until next year. People inside our company. IDOT really did a good job. Metra helped out in that, and that contract will be signed this week, and that construction will start shortly. On the CPG side, the CREATE side, as far as those improvements that will significantly improve the flow of freight traffic, thus keeping the freight trains out of the way of the passenger trains on our line. WA4, that's the project number, that's to connect Cicero with Corwith at 21st Street, which I'm sure probably nobody knows where that is, but it's just east of Cicero. That project is now under construction. That's a good thing. 18 months from now, that'll be done. WA3, which is an NS project in the same territory, is underway, and then the WA2, another NS project, is also under construction. So what, who cares, right? Western Avenue corridor will flow a whole lot better, which means trains coming off, freight trains coming off of our property, going to the eastern carriers, will flow more efficiently, and thus they won't get in the way of the passenger service. All those projects funded by FHWA, IDOT, and the freight railroads are now under construction. And that Western Avenue corridor, if anyone ever wants to take a look at that, I know the CPG people will be more than happy to let everyone look at it. So that was those remarks. Any questions?
Mr. Mitchell, thank you very much. Don, did you want to add something?
I just wanted to add one thing. DJ, I can't tell you how much I appreciate your efforts also, and also Greg Fox and everybody else doing the Greg. You weren't happy with the performance, we weren't happy with the performance, but more important than anything is our customers were happy with our performance. We've all worked together to try to come up with a plan that looks like it's going to work, and I appreciate all the efforts. I know no one likes to get out of bed at 1 o'clock in the morning and sit down and call to make sure you don't have a problem in the morning, but it's working. So please share that with everybody. Okay.
John, I think it would be appropriate if you told them who Greg Fox is.
Greg Fox is the BN Executive Vice President, Chief Operations Officer. He is very much involved in this. We had personal meetings about the performance, and he's got his team together. And everybody looked at this in a positive sense, proactively, and looked at opportunities we could to get it corrected. And there was nothing off the table, as you can see, as DJ mentioned. There's a lot of initiatives that have been put in place, and our customers appreciate it.
And I think also, DJ, I'm sure that Carl Isis, who is your CEO, has also got his eyes on this as well, I guess.
He does.
Yeah, I know he does, because I know him.
Yeah, he gets a report every morning, I know that also.
The point is the top of the house at BNSF has been involved in that, and I think we want to get that on the record.
Absolutely.
John?
I just have a couple of things that I really appreciated your briefing. On your look ahead, your 17, 18-hour look ahead on that part of your planning, you're looking ahead that far for how I guess basically how long is the cycle you're covering when you're looking ahead, if I'm making myself clear?
Yes, you are. Very good question. The answer is it's a continuous cycle. We'll look ahead 12 hours to 17 hours. The next 12 hours, we'll look ahead another 17 hours and keep that going. And frankly, when things get bottled up someplace like Minneapolis, which is happening right now, we'll take it out 24 hours, 36 hours, and begin to estimate what kind of traffic will be flowing our way, and then find places to stage it so it comes into Chicago, not during rush hour.
Right, and I guess I was also trying to figure out what's the operational period that you're doing the planning for? Is it a defined operational period, or is it just rolling?
It rolls.
Okay.
Because things change too often.
Okay.
And so we have to refresh on a regular basis.
Right. And my other question is on your winter plan, I presume you're going to exercise that somewhere along the line before the frost gets on the pumpkins?
Absolutely, positively. And that we'll start working on the switches well before there's frost.
My thought is the winter plan, aside from the maintenance and that kind of stuff, does it go into winter emergency operations and other operations when you get the polar vortex and that kind of thing? Or is it more of a maintenance plan?
It covers all aspects of the operation. So the maintenance away, the reliability of the plant, the response to a heavy storm, our safety program, our safety protocols, briefings with the crews as to what they're supposed to do with the passengers. It is all inclusive.
Don?
Director of Plan, we're going to be actively involved with the UP, the BN, and Metra to do those same types of things and work the plans and exercise the plans. I had sent out earlier to the board, some of the things that we looked at. I know you and I are going to meet next week and talk about that. We're definitely going to make sure that we're all in sync of what we're going to do with our passengers, how we're going to do things. Look at refining some of the scheduling, which we talked about earlier. So if we have to go on modified schedules, or be pre-posted on websites so people will know what's going on. If we have to exercise that and go to the next level. That we've learned a lot from last year, and we will give the board updates on that. We just got to get together and make sure everybody's in sync with it, and then we'll present it to the board. And I'm looking for the opportunity that all three of us will come to the board and talk about some of the plans and what we're doing, so there won't be any surprises.
Well, when we get around to doing the exercises, I just like to sit in the room and observe.
No problem. All right. Any other questions for Mr. Mitchell? I'd just like to take this moment to make an observation, mostly for the benefit of the public and the press who are here, hopefully who can report on your report. It's worth repeating, and I've learned a lot about this in the short time I've been on the Metra board. Many of us, because we're a public body, when problems arise with our UP and BN partners, we get feedback saying, why don't you crack down on these people? Why don't you sue them? What's wrong with your contract? And so forth. And what I think is always useful in a continuing effort to educate the public, to explain how complex railroad operations are, about how many things are not covered in any contract, about how we have working partnerships with the BN and the UP, and all of the things that DJ ticked off here, particularly if, like me, if you're not really familiar with the operation of a railroad, these are significant steps that the BN has undertaken to correct these problems. This is not window dressing or just papering it over. These are significant, meaningful operational steps, and these things don't happen by running into court and enforcing contracts. They happen, really, I think Metra is fortunate because Don Orsino is one of the foremost experts in railroad operations. He has a working partnership with our partners, and together we sit down in constructive fashion to solve these problems. There's a dynamic tension. There will be days when we may have to come down on your head, but really people should understand that these problems get solved in a constructive fashion. But it's tempting when a rider is sitting on a delayed train, and I get the text from the people who have my cell number, and I'm sure you do. What's wrong with these people? Why are you so easy on them? That's really not, people just don't understand this. So I want to congratulate Philly. I don't think it's excessive. Both organizations, Metra, led by Don, and the BN, for stepping up when these problems came to the fore and moving forward. I really think it's very constructive. We'll be keeping an eye on it, though.
I hope you would.
Thank you, DJ.
Thank you, Marty. Could we get the talking points of this presentation out to the directors? Because I think there's a few of us that would like to have them because of the questions we get.
I think that'd be great. Of course, it'll be, we keep a record of all of this anyway, so maybe we can get it before the minutes. DJ gave a very long and detailed outline, but I think it's an excellent point, Norm, because some of this went so fast and it's so complicated, we may want to say, what does that really mean and how is it really going to work? I know, I didn't want to delay the meeting for now, but I know the significance of those things. Arlene?
I just wanted to add with your statements about complexity of the railroad. I know that many of the mayor's meetings over the years that
move a little closer to the microphone.
Closer. That the Chicago region, I might, is the only one where all 6 major railroads come through in the nation. And it's very important from an economic standpoint to realize the good fortune that we have from job creation, that we have this cooperation. And so thank you and thank our partners for working together to solve a lot of these problems.
Okay, let's move on. Next on the agenda, Tom Farmer, our financial report.
Good morning, my name is Tom Farmer. I'm the Chief Financial Officer at Metra. And today I would like to present our May results. So as you can see, for the month of May, our fare revenue was essentially on budget. And other revenue was $300,000 over budget. Inside the other revenue category, leases were on budget, advertising was on budget, and capital credits, which really means the revenue that we derived from various construction projects, was a few $100,000 over. In past months, we've had considerable discussion about capital credits because it's extremely volatile based on the construction season, that sort of thing. At this point, Capital credits is running ahead of budget, and I don't see any reason why it should run under budget for the full year. The next item I'd like to discuss is the operating expenses. Inside of operating expenses, the first item is operations and maintenance, and you'll see that that's over budget by $400,000. What you've got going on there is we're still seeing a little bit of aftermath, largely in the maintenance area, in the operations side, in the maintenance side. And what's going on there is during the winter, we had all the winter costs. Those costs have occurred and those costs have been captured. But what happened was while we were all busy dealing with the winter, some other things weren't going on that needed to be going on. And so the team is still catching up with some of the normal maintenance. Having said that, I'm not going to suggest that maintenance is going to get back on budget for the full year because, as you know, we have an aging fleet and the costs of maintaining those vehicles is going up. So I think you're going to see that probably, certainly you won't see that cost recover. In other words, the overage that we had is going to remain there. And it wouldn't surprise me if we see that slightly over budget every month for the rest of the year. In administration and regional services, we're running right on budget. We've been running favorable most months, and I expect that that trend will continue, that full year favorability will remain a full year favorability. In diesel fuel, you had a lot of good news this month. Most of that, about $550,000 of that was price. A couple $100,000 of that was usage. That's the first month where we've had a positive usage variance, and the other months it's been negative, and that's largely been due to snow-related conditions. Normally the usage variance is close to zero, although some months it's plus, some months it's minus. Metro Electric District electricity is right on budget. We recently negotiated a new contract for Metro Electric District electricity. It runs for 15 months, and I believe it begins August 1st. The cost there is forecasted to go up about $1 million over the prior, on a full year basis. Over the prior, we budgeted $800,000, so we were pretty close to that. We knew power was going up. So I expect that that cost item will remain in good shape for the full year. And usage on that is usually fairly negligible. You know, some months it's a little up, some months it's a little down, but usually very predictable. Claims and insurance was $900,000 over this month. We've had discussions in prior board meetings that the claims and insurance cost item is very much a sawtooth cost. As items occur or as we revalue our liabilities, sometimes there's a fair slug of good news, sometimes a fair slug of bad news. It's very difficult to predict, but I don't see any particular reason that that won't be right on in terms of full year. So that this month's fluctuation doesn't concern me. Downtown stations, what you see there is the cost of leasing the downtown stations. That is a cost which is largely dependent on the consumer price index. I believe it's updated quarterly. And as of now, we're running slightly favorable on the year, and it was right on budget for the month. So for the month, our operating deficit was $200,000 minus in total. And our revenue recovery ratio was almost 1% under where we wanted to be. As I talked to you before, we were running under and running worse to budget in the first few months, largely because of snow-related issues. And I had suggested that I saw us perhaps clawing back to the zero line sometime June or July. I believe that's still an accurate forecast. It's been a difficult run, but I think we will get there. On the full year, the story is much the same. Passenger revenue is $500,000 less than budget, and really year-to-date passenger revenue has been very close to budget. It's never had a month so far that it's been more than 1% plus or minus to where we budgeted. And I believe that after you see the June results come in, that minus will actually swing to a small plus because the first rushes at June looked like it was slightly favorable. In terms of other revenue, leases and advertising have been running very close to budget. Capital credits on the full year, that's $1 million up, and I don't know if it'll stay $1 million up, but I don't see any reason to believe it'll be minus for the year. I think it'll be at least on budget for the year. So revenue is looking likely to come out very close to the $310 million we've budgeted for ridership rather, and 360 for the total. For operating expenses, Operation and maintenance, as I just discussed, we had a lot of cost, snow-related in the first few months. We'll probably never entirely claw that back, but we will have offsets in other areas. Administration is $2 million favorable year to date, and I expect a lot of that favorability to remain. Diesel fuel is running about $400,000 favorable, and I think that that number will probably get slightly more favorable as the year goes on because fuel prices seem to have mitigated and we're not having the winter-related usage problems we were having before. Metro Electric District electricity, it's very close to budget, and I expect it to remain so. Claims and insurance, although it's minus now, I expect that that will be very near budget by the time the year's ended. And downtown stations, I believe that that number will also be very near budget. I think that we're going to see the CPI start to pick up just a little bit. So I don't see a lot of change in that. So for the full year, I think that we will achieve our recovery ratio and deficit targets. So that concludes my report. If you have any questions on any of that.
Any questions? Tom? So Carol?
Thank you very much.
Nothing left. Thank you very much. Next, Lynette, Regional Fair Payment Update.
Good morning again. So I'm going to give you an update on our efforts for the last month over the Regional Fair Payment System. As I mentioned last month, there are actually two efforts and two different courses that we're taking in order to implement the regional fairs. The one we've been talking a lot about is the mobile ticketing, and I'll get to that second. The first one that I want to talk about is the discussion related to AST and the work that we need to do with the contactless card and readers that Sherry addressed on the procurement piece. So the process for the contactless device deployment actually began well over a year ago. So it was last July that we actually started to look at the devices themselves, doing the design work that needed to be done to support not only the contactless debit card function, but also the ensuing mobile ticketing that we will be moving forward with. During the fourth quarter of 2013 and then continuing into the beginning of this year, we actually did some testing, some proof of concept testing of the contactless readers and the software to see how the functionality would work with our system. And then in April, we did some hardcore field testing. And the field testing was purchasing a few of the point-of-sale terminals as well as the contactless device readers in order to see how they actually worked and performed within Metra's software environment. First in our lab, and then actually out into a handful of field locations they were tested. Once we knew what we were going to be able to purchase, how it was all going to work together, we put together the project plan, and the project plan was then discussed with the RTA. And the discussion with the RTA was related to our ICE funding. We kind of talked a little bit about that earlier in the board meeting to make sure that RTA understood the components of the project, what was going to be required, and how we were going to go ahead and fund that. So we've had those conversations with them. Late last month, they told us that we can go ahead and do the application for the ICE funding and be able to move forward through the project. So today, you had the procurement package for the approval to do the changes necessary for the new capabilities for the POS machine in our revenue accounting system. So that's the software side that we need to get up and running in order for us to be able to do some of the testing related to the new terminals and the readers. In parallel to that software development, we have a second piece that's going on related to that, and that's the actual procurement of the devices. So there are 140 new POS terminal devices that we'll need to purchase, as well as 140 contactless card reader devices that we'll need to do. And then there will be parts and labors to actually install the devices out so that our customers can use them. So we're anticipating to have the POS terminals and the new contactless readers to the board in September for your approval. Like I said, that's a two-fold piece, so software and then the actual hardware. Once we get that to the board, the devices should be delivered in the October time period, and then we'll go out and start doing some of the installation. The plan is really to hit the ticket windows once and only once. So as we go out to the ticket windows, we'll swap out the POS device and then we'll put in the needed work to replace the credit card processing device as well, and get both of those features kind of up and running. What's key is that the credit card processing piece will work with the Max Stripe. So what will happen is that in order to actually get the functionality of the contactless piece, we need to have all of the software updated. So we'll start using some of those new devices, and then once the software is 100% updated and ready to go, it can be pushed out to all of the ticket windows and turned on to go live. At this point, IS and the IS team that's working through the project is on track, and they believe that we'll be able to go ahead and have all of that done towards the end of this year in advance of the legislation. So that is, as the legislation says, Metra's ability to accept contactless credit and debit cards at our stations. So that will address that piece. So the second piece that we've been working through is the mobile ticketing application, and the mobile ticketing application is with our partners, our regional partners, CTA and PACE and their vendors, as well as discussions with the RTA. And at the last meeting, I told you that I was hopeful I would be bringing forward an IGA. I do not have an IGA for you today. We are still going through a handful of the agreements, and in consultation with CTA and ourselves, we decided it was best, instead of to provide the information on a piecemeal basis, that we bring all of the materials together at once. So as a result, we are still working through some of the final tweaks to the IGA, as well as the contract with CTA and their vendor. And we will be getting back to you in the coming weeks with the resolution of those talks. There has been a lot of progress made and a lot of discussion, but anytime you get into details such as these, it's a lot of dotting of the I's and crossing of those T's, or making sure that we get that as best as we can. That's the regional fair update. I'll take any questions.
Any questions?
We're trying. Thank you.
Another thorough report. Thanks, Lynette. Bruce Marchese, Positive Trend Control Report.
And then I thought Janice was going to do it.
Might be less expensive.
You're blushing.
Good morning. Since the last update I presented to the board, the engineering department has engaged in various tasks and continued efforts towards Metra's implementation of PTC. We are continuing work to make our current signal interlocker upgrade projects PTC compatible. These projects include A5, B17, the Joliet interlocker, which some of us visited this morning, Morton Grove, Lake Forest, Deerfield, and Inglewood flyover. We are also finishing up with our in-house signal designs so we can get them ready to go out for bid as well. Some of those designs are on the Metro Electric District, the Rock Island, and the Southwest Service. Once we get these packages delivered to procurement and awarded, contracts work is scheduled to begin in the late first quarter, early second quarter of 2015. Although we've been making progress towards implementing PTC, there's still a great deal of work ahead that needs to be accomplished. One significant and key component to the PTC system is the systems integrator. As you might recall, Metra solicited bids for the system integrator in late 2013. Metra received a single bid for the PTC system integrator at the end of January 2014. After a thorough review and evaluation by the engineering department and mechanical departments, it was determined that the single cost proposal be rejected. This decision was based on the fact that the cost proposal was far exceeding Metra's estimate, as well as exceptions taken to the specifications and the terms and conditions by the proposer. Once it was determined that the system integrator proposal was going to be rejected, Metra reached out to the Union Pacific and Burlington Northern Santa Fe Railroads for assistance. The UP and BNSF both agreed to assist Metra with our PTC implementation. Metra is currently working with the Union Pacific to revise this current SI, as we call it, system integrator specification, to produce a more streamlined bid package in efforts to attract more competitive bidders and efforts also to reduce costs. We also will be meeting at the end of August with the Burlington Northern Santa Fe to discuss how they can assist us as well. After the initial meeting with the UP, it was decided that Metro will assume a more prominent leadership role by increasing direct involvement of PTC work than originally specified in the system integrator package. We are currently reviewing the system integrator specification and removing specific items from the specification that Metro can competitively procure on its own. This will eliminate unnecessary profit markups and allow us to continue to proceed on a parallel path while revising the SI specification. Some of the items that we're going to remove but are not limited to that we identified at this point are the onboard radios, base station radios, wayside signal equipment, antenna towers and structures, equipment cases, and associated hardware for onboard for the mechanical department. As we continue to work with the Union Pacific to revise this specification, we're going to make every effort to reduce the cost, but not jeopardize the integrity and quality of the PTC system that we want to implement. We anticipate the completion of the revised system integrator specification package by the end of the year and are looking to award a contract to be awarded sometime in the first quarter of 2015. Our goal at this point is to purchase all the equipment that does not require extensive design work. In other words, equipment that's pretty much off the shelf that we can buy ourselves. Our top priority is to have all of the onboard equipment purchased and installed and operational on the UP and BNSF rolling stock by the end of 2015 in order to be operable with these two railroads. As for the other remaining challenges that still exist throughout the industry, the radio frequency demand study for Chicago is still ongoing. After recently speaking with the firm responsible for performing the study, we are informed that the study is not expected to be completed until the end of 2014 or maybe possibly early 2015. The results of the study will determine how much radio spectrum is needed for PTC in Chicago. The development and production of the PTC hardware, such as the onboard computers, wayside radios, onboard radios, has made significant progress and is now more readily available for purchase for the industry. The software, on the other hand, still has its issues. The onboard train management computer and the back office server core operating software are still being tested and debugged. The release date of this production software continues to slip into the end of 2014 and most likely feel is going to be into 2015. The rigorous and extensive testing of the software for efficiency and reliability continues to produce problems with the software, making the production dates continue to slip. Although there is still much work to be done in order to get a fully implemented, compliant, and operational PTC system, we now believe that we have a more solid and effective approach, and with the help of our freight partners, we believe we can achieve our goal. And now I'd like to have Jim Nowinski just give a mechanical update on PTC.
Thank you. Very briefly, we've started the installation of the onboard equipment at the Rock Island facilities and the Western Avenue facilities. Currently, we have just over 50 vehicles equipped. The beginning of August here, we will be testing Metra equipment on BNSF trackage in their PTC territory. That'll begin our actual onboard testing with the current system. As Mr. Marchese stated, working out the bugs and seeing what else has to be done. We're fully staffed for what we propose to do. The equipment shortages have been felt as I've had to pull at least 4 vehicles, 5 vehicles out of service a week to perform the installation on the PTC. And that's about all I have for you. Any questions?
Are there any questions for either Bruce or Jim? Tom?
It just seems to me that we've talked about PTC now for a number of years, and from a hardware perspective, there's good progress. There's a lot of good work being done. We know that there are issues from a software perspective that will take us well into, if not the end of this year, well into 2015, this first quarter. We also have radio spectrum situation. We don't know where that's going to go. So we're spending a lot of resources doing what we need to do from a hardware perspective, but we can't do anything without the software and the radio issue, right?
Correct. Well, as far as the radio, we're going to be able to get them on board on the BN and UP. That's our goal. We're going to buy all the radios that we need for our entire system. We've got purchase orders in the hopper right now for all the radio equipment, not only on board, but all wayside radio equipment as well. So we can get that installed. The freights were what's called PTC 220 LLC. They own Spectrum in Chicago. If we were to launch the Union Pacific and the Burlington Northern, and DJ, if you jump in and correct me if I'm saying anything wrong, the amount of spectrum to run our two railroads, I believe is enough just for our two railroads. But now you have to take into consideration the whole picture when we get to that. That seems to be, can be, and may be a problem once the study is over. We're not sure.
Well, that's right. I guess where I'm going with this, we're using valuable resources to do what we need to do, and that's important we do that. On the other hand, it's possible, if not likely, that there's going to be a disjointed effort because we're going to get a lot of this done, but we can't do anything until mid-2015, end of 2015, 2016, because we're trying to comply, which all gets us back to square one, which says, you know, this end of December 2015 date is so unrealistic, and obviously we need to do what we need to do. But I'm concerned about the disjointed effort of working so hard to do what we can do from a cost standpoint and the utilization of resources based on hardware proficiency and not being able to keep up from radio and software perspective. It's like we're going to be here, but we got to wait another 6 months or a year to catch up down here. That's what concerns me about budgeting and this whole PTC issue.
Right, absolutely. That's a challenge, and what you said is 100% accurate. We need to keep moving at what we're doing because we want to show our due diligence that we're not just sitting waiting for a miracle to happen or something. We were out there doing what we need to do, but at the same time, right, we're expending resources and capital at the same time. But hopefully, the industry will get the software problems resolved. I mean, it is a complex system, as we all know, and the more we test it, I mean, the problem seems to just keep compounding with the fail-safe situation. They want to make it more safe, more redundant, and every time we do that, they find different things that pop up, and it's kind of like the sky is falling. You want to make sure that you have 2 backup systems, 3 backup systems. What happens if this fails? You know, because the bottom line is if you stop communicating, you have a backup system for communications. But if your software fails, how does that computer system be in hot standby, so to speak, to pick that up? Because if you stop running, then we go to slower.
We'd like to graph, if I can also add, I met with Administrator Zabel on Wednesday and talked about some of these issues. The one thing we can't lose track of, and I know you're fully aware of it, the whole board, is the end date, and Congress has not extended that. We made several visits to some of the congressional delegation and also senators and things in the last 2 days talking about this, because we really need to, even if we had all the money in the world right now, we wouldn't be able to actually comply with the 2015 end date. There's just no way to do that. But based on a good faith effort, and that's what we've been asking for, not just to push the end date out, because the end date out, some people might look at it, but I just won't look at it until the end date. We'll be back in the same situation. We need to really keep our eyes focused on it so we can prove to the FRA, if they are allowed to do this through Congress, that they come on territory or whatever. I've also offered APTA CEO group, since I chair that committee now, to work with the FRA. If they are allowed to do that, what would be the right and reasonable things to, what targets to hit, rather than not having a seat at the table. I thought it was more important to have a seat at the table, so if they do allow these, what are the things you're going to be looking at to allow us to progress so we don't get stuck behind the 8 ball? But we believe with the BN and the UP on board, if it does get resolved and it is up and running, we will show a significant effort, and they were very happy with that.
Yeah, our good friend Joe Zabo has got his hands tied, and we all know that, and he's willing to work with us and everybody else. Given what happened in California, given the history of the importance of PTC, we understand it, but I think there's a realistic and practical point where our legislature in Washington has to make a decision to give us the opportunity to schedule things appropriately. And at this point, it's clear it's going to be disconcerted and disjointed. So we need to get a revised date.
I don't disagree with you, and we have shared that message with every single person we talked to in Washington.
Do you get any feedback, Don, in these visits you've just had that Congress may well move in that direction, or is it just a blank wall at this point? What are we hearing?
You know, it depends on who you talk to. Some people think that there may be some progress in it. Other people want to hold off a little bit and see. They don't want people to stop working on it. There's absolutely, in my opinion, Donald's opinion, that with as many people that will not be able to comply with it, especially the commuter rail side of the world, we're looking at staggering numbers. And one of the things I was saying with the big capital deficits, we've got to move towards this direction to get it done. They understand it. I think everybody at the end of the day will realize it. If they don't, but no matter what happens, the time's marching on. So I'm hopeful myself, but some people think it's there. Some people just don't weigh in right now because they don't know what it's at.
Jack?
I assume that these burdens are the same for our peer group, the Big Six, is that correct? Everybody has the same problems.
Right. The Big Six, I mean, they've been purchasing the hardware up front. They've been installing it, but they're still experiencing the software issues as well. So, I mean, it's constant
We're
testing.
essentially the same shape, everybody's in the same condition.
Well,
They're a little bit better than we are, only because...
Not necessarily, because a lot of the big Class 1 railroads have designed the system themselves, and they are much further ahead than we are. We don't have those expertises. A lot of the commuter railroads and the smaller railroads don't have that. Some of the issues, they're dependent on the interoperability and the back end and things like that, but as far as the design of it and what they're doing, if they're doing it with their forces, they've had the resources, not that they wanted to spend it on that, but we all understand it's the law and that, so they've had the resources to do it. Our challenge is multifaceted. It's the resources, it's technology, and then the challenges that some of the Class 1s have, the Big Six or 7, the towers, when you start getting into the towers out west and the FCC, this has tentacles into many, many different departments and areas.
It seems that Congress is going to have to take some action if everybody's having the same problem and we have a final date creeping up on us. If the communications proper up to Congress, they're going to have to do something. They're going to have to take some action.
One can only be hopeful that that's what happens. I don't disagree with you. I think that's what has to happen, because I don't think it's going to happen for a lot of agencies and some of the Class 1s. Some of the Class 1s are further than others. So I think something's going to have to happen, and I don't see any way around it personally.
I think we should lay on the record that this PTC has become perhaps a perpetual unfunded mandate. And by that I mean we're going to have operating costs when this gets into being. And my understanding is the railroad industry has said that this could be anywhere from 5 to 15% of the capital investment that you have in this. Well, if we have rough round 250 million invested in this, or whatever the number turns out to be, let's take the average of that. That's 10% of additional cost, which is millions of dollars of cost that we are going to have to absorb at this point in time. So this is not just a one-time thing. This is perpetual going forward, as I understand it.
That is absolutely correct. I've heard a lot of different numbers, but I think realistically around the 5% number is going to be, who knows what it's really going to be until you get out there and get the equipment used. But it's a gift that keeps on giving. There's no doubt about it. And it's going to take a lot of operating dollars to support it.
Any other questions? I'd just like to add in first, I want to compliment you on having reached out to the BUP and the BN for additional resources. Just another example, I guess, not to be the dead horse, but it's a very fitting, very helpful, as I understand it, to getting this thing underway.
That's making very helpful. It's moving, it's opened our eyes to a lot of avenues. It's given us a lot of ideas what to do and what not to do. They've been through everything. They've hit the brick walls before we have. They know the do's, don'ts, and the trials and tribulations. So I believe going forward, this partnership is going to be very beneficial for us.
Good. Thank you. All right. Janice, you're on. This is the report of the Office of Business Diversity and Civil Rights.
Good morning. My name is Janice Thomas. I'm the Senior Director of the Office of Business Diversity and Civil Rights, and I will be presenting our quarterly report for our DBE program. I first want to comment that I just returned from the COMTO conference in Atlanta. That's the Conference of Minority Transportation Officials. And at that conference, it was very heavily attended by the senior level executives from the DOT, US DOT, and the FTA. And APTA sponsored the DBE session. The executive director, Mr. Michael Malanfey, was there. And across the country, The federal government is very committed to the DB program and ensuring that it is actually administered properly. And the FTA Civil Rights Administrator said that kudos goes out to Metra's DB program. So no credit to myself. It's a team that you rarely get to see. Without them, I wouldn't be able to do the things that I do. And I just wanted to share that information with the board. This is our quarterly, three-year look of our DB program. So if you look at the top part of the screen, that represents our DB participation with our favorite project, Inglewood Flyover. I should say my favorite project. So it gives a spread of the breakdown and the participation on the project. So if you can see, the African American participation is currently 9.3. We have the Hispanic participation. This is the commitment from the primes, and we're monitoring it. And so far, it's tracking along that the numbers will actually be what you see on the screen, or maybe possibly more. The Hispanic American participation is 5.3, Asian American 5.4, Asian Pacific 1.1, and non-minority women 27.7. So, but when we report our information to the FTA, we were not allowed to submit the Inglewood dollars. So no matter how hard I fought and screamed and shouted, they said that the funding went to IDOT, so we were not able to report that to the FTA. So the bottom half of the screen represents our participation without Inglewood flyover for the period that I'm speaking of. So just wanted to share that participation information with you. Our goal attainment. So you can see the 2011, so it's also broken down Inglewood at the top and non-Inglewood at the bottom. Our DB goal is a 21% annual goal, which is broken down 12% race conscious and 9% race neutral. By race conscious, I mean that's where we actually set a goal on a contract by contract basis. Race neutral, we do not assign a goal, but we use extensive outreach efforts, and we also encourage the prime contractor to identify an opportunity for a DB to participate without a goal being on the project. So you can see for 2011, we did very well. 2012, the top part, it looks good. The bottom half, since we were not allowed to report Inglewood to the FTA, we had a shortfall analysis, which we had to do explanation of what we would do to improve. And of course, I reminded them of all of our efforts that we put in for the Inglewood Flower Project, and we would continue to dedicate ourselves to making sure that we comply with the goal. And for 2013, we actually did meet our goal. We surpassed it, actually. So I'm not too concerned about not meeting the goal. That was just a situation, our legislative rule that was beyond our control. Our DB commitment for this current fiscal year that we're in, from October 2013 through June 2014, we have a race conscious commitment of $3 million and a race neutral commitment of 1.5, which gives a total of where we are today. That number is slightly in line, well, it is in line with last year this time, 4.1. When we look at our DB participation, we have to also take into consideration the seasons. We all know we had a very long winter, and the types of procurements that are put out. When we have more rail-specific procurements, sometimes it does not provide an opportunity for a DBE firm to participate. But those numbers are very good numbers for our program, especially the race-neutral numbers. Outreach efforts. Here you can see a list of outreach efforts that our staff participated in. And if you go down to the bottom of the screen, the certification workshop at the CTA, my counterpart there, reached out and asked if we would conduct a certification workshop to their staff, because they felt that the way we do the certification is actually a very good way of doing it. It's very thorough, and we actually do not have a backlog. So we spent an entire day at the CTA doing a comprehensive training to their staff, and we're packaging that, and hopefully we can take that on the road and offer it to other DOT certifying agencies. Metra, for the first time, hosted its own outreach event, and we called it Building on the Best for 2014. and we gave out several awards. We sectioned them by Prime Contractor of the Year, and Subcontractor of the Year, Emerging Small Business, and Diversity Champion Award. And I thought it was very important to section the awards this way. Without the prime contractors, a lot of times the small businesses would not have an opportunity to participate. And then the Subcontractor of the Year, sometimes they're subs, and it's a combination of sub or prime. Emerging Small Business is just what it says. These are individuals who have been in business for less than 10 years, and they have been very successful in participating on federal government transportation contracts. And the Diversity Champion of the Year, we need them. They help us reach out into the communities, make the small businesses aware of our programs and opportunities. So it was a very good event. Mr. Orsino, you can see him smiling there. He was there as the champion of the day, giving out awards. So it was a very, they had a good participation and a great turnout. Our networking exhibitors, we had a combination of some of our peer agencies and our prime contractors, and we are looking forward to doing this event annually. This is some of our survey results. We asked the hard questions. Did you think that it was excellent, very good, fairly good, mildly good, or not good at all? And we're very glad that no one thought that it was not good at all. And we asked them would they be likely to attend the event again. And of course, we got a lot of yeses, and people thought that it was a great opportunity, a chance to meet with Metra, the first tier and second tier. And they liked the awards, and they said the CEO is a funny guy, and they liked the video. Activity report. And this is a look at our day-to-day. Our labor compliance, this is our Davis Bacon and related acts part, the prevailing wage piece. So you can see the certified payrolls that we reviewed and the payment applications that were received from April to June. Certification report, we received, certification files, and those files are sectioned depending on if it's an initial, no change affidavit. That's once you're certified annually, you do a no change. Continued eligibility affidavit, every 5 years you have to go through renewal process. The files that was processed, site visits, staff conducted, and within the Illinois UCP, which the members are Metra, PACE, CTA, IDOT, and the City of Chicago, Metra hosts 210 of those vendors. And the reason why we do so much outreach, our goal is to grow our program so that we can have more qualified firms participating. And then the more firms you have participation, of course, more competition and hopefully better pricing. Our 2014 three-month plan is to finalize our availability study. The FTA requires that every 3 years you submit what your DD goals will be. So we're in the process of finalizing RFP. I believe the responses are in, right, Paul? And that will be reviewed and evaluated, and hopefully we will have a vendor on board so that we can complete the availability study. The rollout of our Small Business Enterprise Program. This is fostering small businesses, 49 CFR 26.39. Last year, the USDOT included or incorporated in all federal DB programs in the circular a requirement that you have a way for small businesses to participate. Those are firms who don't necessarily meet the minority and female requirement, but they are small in the areas of their personal net worth and the gross receipts of their company. We have the application process ready, but the UCP, we have to agree as one. We do not want to create a situation where a firm would have to go through the small business verification process 5 times. We need to be unified in this area just like we are with our DBE certification. So we're still working through that. Identify and finalize our Davis Bacon tracking and monitoring. So that certified payroll that you saw earlier, we just successfully completed our audit, and we are doing very well in that area. Ms. Christine Murphy on our staff, she actually does all those reviews manually, and that's very intensive and involved. So we are still in the process of trying to finalize our software solution so that the vendors, contractors will be able to enter it and then submit it, and the system will do the verification for them. Develop a standardized training for doing business with Metra and doing business with prime contractors. This is something that we're working on, and we're hoping to be able to roll that out by the end of the year. And our stretch goals, we want to identify and finalize the agency-wide prompt payment process and draft the RFP for a four-factor analysis. I believe this completes my presentation. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer.
Manny?
On the very first screen that you had up there, you had the percentage on top with a number beneath it. What does the number beneath it represent?
Can I get back there?
That was the exact same question I had, Manny.
Right.
Thank you.
No, the other screen, the one there.
There, yeah.
What's the bottom number?
So the number at the top represents the dollar amount that was committed to the total value, and that's the number of firms.
Now, given that a lot of our work is very specialized and that we focus on a specific geographic region, do you find that the firms are pretty much the same ones coming back over and over again? Or?
That's a good question. If we look at, so I'm answering two ways. As far as our prime contractors, we find that those firms are the same ones that we generally do business with. As far as the DBE firms, it varies. It really, we don't have a say-so on who the prime selects when there's a race-conscious participation. The primes have the autonomy to select the firm that they want to do business with because our contract is with the prime and not the sub. As far as the race-neutral participation, that varies. We are seeing firms who have never done business with Metra before being successful. So I would say it's a combination of the new and the old.
Thanks, Manny. Any other questions? Janice, thank you. Very thorough. Report. Okay, Tom, you're back up here for a preliminary discussion of our budget.
Okay, well, thank you once again. I would like to now spend a minute and take you through a little bit of preliminary budget information. So what I present to you on this slide is some key budget dates. Some of these are dictated to us by the RTA, and some of them are there for our own administrative convenience. In July, the RTA will be releasing what they call marks, which really means that they will be giving us a target for revenue, recovery ratio. They will be giving us estimates of sales taxes and other various information which they provide to us. In August, we will likely be presenting you a preliminary budget of some form. Some of this may be informal, some of it at board meeting. And there will probably be considerable discussion among the board members of the various alternatives which we will present to you. And we expect that come September, we will be ready to provide you an updated budget which will hopefully at least resemble the final product in shape and form. On September 30th, we have to give the RTA draft operating plan, and it's expected that that would be reasonably close to what the final product would look like so that they can examine it, analyze it, that sort of thing. In October, we would present the draft budget to the Metra board and request approval from you to release it to the public for their review and comment, and we would present it to the RTA board at that same time. And in November, we would request a formal adoption of the final budget after you have had time to not only review the final product, but also the public comment that might have occurred on it up to that time. The next slide, I would like to describe to you the 2013 and 2014 budget, kind of where it goes. So the biggest item by far is our labor and fringe, followed by diesel fuel. Most of our other items just don't comprise that big a part of the budget. In a couple of slides from now, I'll be describing to you in great detail the increases in labor and fringe. We already know pretty much what those are going to be because there are signed contracts largely in place between us and our employees, as well as at the PSA carriers and their employees. So here is some of the information that we have as of this point. The RTA has suggested that the sales tax revenues are projected to increase by 4%, so we've gone with that. That number may change a little bit, but it's probably reasonably close to the final product. The reduced fare subsidy is a subsidy that the state of Illinois provides to us to help, and it's a pot of money that is divided between CTA, PACE, and Metra, and this is our share. It had been reduced in the prior year, but at least the preliminary budget suggests it will be restored to normal levels, so that is what we have budgeted. And the RTA has suggested that the revenue recovery ratio, which they would like us to achieve, is 53%, so we've laid that in as also for your information. Passenger revenue, as I discussed during the finance portion of the presentation, right now our ridership revenue is very, very close to budget. I just don't see any significant difference from that. So we've projected that flat year over year. The security grants which we receive, they're multi-year grants. We have a pretty good idea what they'll be and what the draw will be, so I've projected that as flat also. Capital fare box financing, we've projected to go up. So let me explain what capital fare box financing is. That is an amount of money which we take from the fare revenues and we devote that specifically to capital projects. And that's a fairly important source of money for us because that enables us to make certain purchases that we can't always make with federal or state funds. It's money that's a little bit more encumbered and we can act quickly with it. In other words, we don't have to submit them for approval, things like that. So if something happens where there's a tornado and a roof blows off a building or something, that's the fund that I will look to immediately to provide repairs, that sort of thing. So this is a somewhat more detailed page on our estimated expense growth. The top number is contract labor and fringe of about $16 million. That I believe is a fairly solid number. I've got a couple pages behind this in which I'll dissect that in greater detail. Additional costs for aging equipment and infrastructure. So let's talk about that for a minute. We have showed you many times that our fleet is aging and some of our buildings are getting older. And we have a fairly large backlog in terms of the state of good repair. Well, as this equipment continues to age, we are going to have to start spending more money on a day-to-day basis in order to maintain it, in order to prevent failures, that sort of thing. So what we have in there right now is $1 million, what I've called MOW, which is maintenance of way, which is really track and structure, and $4 million maintenance of equipment, which really means rolling stock. The maintenance of way stuff would probably largely go towards station rehabilitations and that sort of thing. We have some stations that could use some work. They don't necessarily need to be rebuilt, but they could use some paint or some other minor repairs. We're in the process of doing that now, but I think it's been well received and we'll continue that. And the maintenance equipment would be in the mechanical shops working on rolling stock and locomotives. Additional administrative costs, what you see there are a couple of things. First of all, as we continue to develop our business, we need a little bit more data to run it, and it's very likely that we will continue to do different studies, like the study Janice just discussed, and other ones. There will be some of those. There will be additional costs of compliance, some things like that. So this is my estimate at that time for what that's going to cost us. For all other cost items, that's a fairly large cost pool. It's about $300 million. And it comprises diesel fuel, materials, electricity and utilities, claims and insurance, various things, and that pool is essentially projected to go up a little over 3%. Net capital funds is the capital funds I described before, should the board so choose. I have on here a new item, bond repayment fund. Now, we presently do not carry any debt, and I'm not necessarily suggesting that we will. But the question has been asked by several people. If we were to go out and borrow some money, and the amount I picked is $100 million, what do I think the annual debt service cost would be? This represents my estimate of what that cost would be should we choose to make that choice. The final item is PTC costs in operations. So as Director Carlson pointed out a couple of minutes ago, the PTC costs the PTC system will start to cost us money in operations. The full annual amount will be a lot more than this. The number is probably, I'm going to peg it in the $15 million range, but that's extremely a guess. But for this point, what I'm saying is that as we start to install the equipment, both on the wayside, on the locomotives, and start to install some of the bathroom equipment, we will start to have to staff it, and we will start to have some maintenance cost on it. So this represents what I think this will cost in 2015, and this will continue to go up. So this is our estimated expense growth at this time, and it makes a lot of assumptions. It also, for the most part, assumes that a lot of these new events are happening more or less in a vacuum, meaning if I think we need 5 people to do something, I've added 5 people. What's going to happen over the next couple of months is there's going to be a more detailed process of scrubbing, where then we'll say, okay, well, there's 5 people worth of work, but maybe we can move some of it around to people, so maybe it doesn't have to be 5 people. Maybe it becomes 2 or 3. The other thing that hasn't happened yet is annually we go through a process of scrubbing everything that we do and looking for efficiencies. And inevitably we find some. There's never a big gold mine because we go through that process every year, but I would hope we find something. I'm not meaning to suggest that costs are going to go up $49 billion next year. I'm meaning to lay out what the costs of all the things I see coming right now. And as we go through our process of give and take with the board during the budget process, we'll home and refine this number further. So at this point, it's more just information for you. On the NERC, which is the Metra operated railroads, the contract labor and fringe costs, we signed some contracts recently, and the wage increases that are in them are 2.5% July 1st, 2014, and 3% July 1st, 2015. So since the wage base is about $142 million, I'm projecting that the cost base will go up about $4 million. And in addition, there will be payroll tax on that of about another $1 million. So the cost of that is going to be roughly $5 million. You'll see that as the first 2 rows at the bottom of the page. For the NERC contract health insurance, the contract base right now is about $40 million, and our initial projection for the increase on that is 5%, which would be another couple of $1 million. So the initial projection is for $7 million of cost increase in NERC labor. For the PSA carrier contract, you can see at the top of the page the different increases, and really I want you to focus on the bottom 2 of the group of 4 at the top. There's a wage increase July 1st, 2014 of 3.8%, and there's a wage increase January 1st of 2015 of 3%. So I'm projecting that our wage base will go up from about $111 million to about $116 million in 2015. So that's worth about $5 million. And we project that the fringe costs will go up about $4 million. A lot of that's medical, but there's some other things in there too. So if you think about what was on the last page and this page, that's $7 million on the $9 million of PSA carriers. That's about $16 million, and this number is actually reasonably firm. So this is the information that we have at this time on the 2015 budget. I would expect that we'll be having considerable discussions with you as these things continue to clarify in our mind, and we'll be soliciting your opinions on very many of them. So that concludes my presentation, unless you have any questions.
Any questions? I have just one to understand the chart. On the first page, Tom, the labor and fringe is $455 million. That includes both our PSA carriers and
that is correct.
And then, so what is the $16 million under PSA contract cost?
What I'm saying is I expect that 455.8 to become 471.8 in 2015. That 455.8 will go up by 16.
Why is it listed separately?
Oh, you're saying at the bottom.
At the bottom.
I'm sorry. The PSA contract costs you have there are things like management fees, we pay track maintenance, other things like that.
Above it, separate and apart from just the labor.
Yes.
Any other questions? Excellent. Thank you, Tom. Very helpful. Get all dollar sign juices flowing in our head. Okay, so now. Oh, I'm sorry. You're back too.
I'm back again.
Sorry, that was only the operating part. I apologize on that.
That's okay. There's actually, there were 2 presentations in the slide deck. Due to the timing, we're going to skip over the ridership economic trend peer analysis. If any of the board members have any questions related to that, just give me a call. where we're going to be with the 2015 capital program. So the timeline that Tom showed is the exact same timeline that we need to do on the capital side. And the capital side is the one-year program, so a 2015 program, as well as a 5-year program, a 2015 through 2019. So at this point, we have asked for all of the business groups to provide us an update of their 5-year program. We've gone through that probably 2 or 3 times, and of course, every year as we get the asks and the wish list in, they far exceed the amount of formula funding that we'll have available. So over the last few years, as we've tried to whittle down the program to get it to where it needs to be, it has been nothing short of an extremely painful process for I think everybody involved. As we try and outweigh, and make the tough choices of what we're going to put into the program and what we need to move forward. So to give you a bit of an idea of some of the program, the 5-year, I thought it was best to start with the existing 5-year programs that we have. So the existing 5-year program, our federal formula funds in the existing program is about $802.7 million. That's the core, that's the workhorse of our capital program. That's the formula funds that come in. It's pretty much guaranteed. The rest of the items underneath that, that's the top line there, the rest of the items underneath that are things that we get and are great if they supplement and add to our program, but they're not necessarily guaranteed. The 2014 program was bolstered quite a bit for a couple of funding sources. Number one, $45 million worth of RTA state bonds. So we're talking with the RTA to figure out if there might be another bond offering for 2015, but that's $45 million. Likewise, there's $371.4 million in that program for the Illinois Jobs Now and Jumpstart Bond program. Now, going into the 2015 program, not all of that has been funded. In fact, only a portion of that has been funded at this point. So we've been asked by the state to apply for about $73 million of that. So that brings that number down, that outstanding kind of unfunded number, to just shy of $300 million. So I know Dawn and everybody has been talking to the state, trying to figure out exactly if and when and how that money will come forward to us. But as we go into 2015, we will have to try and figure out how we grapple with that if and when that funding comes, and how we go ahead and program the rest of the program. So RTA has released the overall funding marks for the region. They haven't released the individual service marks at this point, but we took a shot at taking our percentage that we usually get. And that's what you see on the slide here. The top line is what we had anticipated through the 5-year program from the marks that were actually released last year. That's the board-approved program. And then we took a shot at what we think the estimate will be. And you'll see that under MAP 21 was generous to us. So we're looking to actually get about $52 million additional dollars over an extended 5-year period just because of MAP 21. Now, of course, there's a little bit of a hitch there because MAP 21 expires. And our guess is, and Sam can probably talk better than I can on this, is that at some point there will be some kind of continuing resolution. It's a question of how long that continuing resolution comes and what they'll be funding the capital program at. So we do have a little bit of a question mark going into that, but yet another thing that we'll need to try and figure out as we put the capital program together. So this slide is actually has been updated. I think everybody knows we've talked about this in terms of our state of good repair. It happens to be our most significant challenge that we face, and it's not only us, it is pretty much all transit properties across the United States, all the transit properties here in northeastern Illinois, is basically a lack of funding to adequately care for all of our capital assets. So the number in the new updated RTA report is $9.9 billion, and our backlog is $6.7 billion. And we expect that we'll receive probably about 20% of that. So how do we balance out that state of good repair? How do we balance out the money coming in from the state? And you heard from Bruce about PTC. how do we balance that into the program? So these are all of the really great questions that we'll be asking ourselves as we try and craft a program to bring back to all of you to provide some guidance. From the RTA assessment, we know that about 50% of our assets have exceeded their useful life and are classified as marginal or in worn condition. And these assets are still safe. So I'll say that again, our assets are still safe, but they are in that worn condition. And when we get into that situation, Tom alluded to it, and I think we've heard it mentioned earlier today, is that it raises our operating costs, it compromises our on-time performance, and it really degrades our system. Metra's ability to achieve a state of good repair clearly is vital for our complete region and for the future mobility of our region. It enhances our network, and without a firm core to our system and keeping our system in a state of good repair, a lot of the other bigger, better, ambitious projects cannot function if we do not have a well-functioning core. So, our priorities as we go through the process, as we try and prioritize the list of the needs and the wants from all of the user departments, we will be going back to the 6 characteristics that we had talked about during the strategic planning process. Those are safety, projects mandated by regulations, state of good repair, and then prioritizing those further as we go in there. I think as you get through the first 3, the line almost kind of stops. The funding will be taken up by the time we get to the top 3 there. So we have a long process ahead of us to try and get down the list of our capital needs into something that constrains it into the marks that the RTA will ultimately provide to us. We will be bringing pieces of the program to the board. You should have a pretty solid program to review and look at by September, and then it will ultimately be refined and submitted to the RTA at the end of September, board concurrence in October, out to public hearing, public meetings in October, and then approved at your November board meeting. So that's the capital programming timeline and process, and I can entertain any questions.
Questions? Thank you, Lynette.
Thank you.
All right, John?
Okay, if I could ask Chief Perez to come up and give us a brief overview of what's going on the last month over at the Metro Police Department.
Thank you, Don. Morning, Chairman. I think it's still morning. Then members, I'm wrong already. I'm going to be brief, as I know we're also going to have another presentation on the police department from Phillard Hines, the consultants that have been here for a while. Last month I spoke about implementing a new staffing plan with the agency. It was my intention to have that plan in place for this board meeting. But as I stated last month, I wanted to meet with the union membership and make sure it was a smooth transition with them. Their leadership wasn't available until this month to meet. So in the last couple of weeks, I have met with them, and we're going to be implementing a plan, as I said, that will more closely match, I believe, the department's calls for service and its renewed public safety mission. I met twice this month with the union leadership, and as I said last month, I understand that these changes that I'm making to the agency, the allocation of the staffing, is going to be difficult for some of the personal lives of the officers. So after listening to the union's concerns, I've moved the implementation of that staffing to August 16th. However, we will be implementing our new staffing plan August 16th. It's my hope that this timeline will give all our officers a little more time to make family adjustments. I believe the model I've crafted will indeed fit Metro PD's mission. However, my staff and I are going to closely monitor the adjustments for any flaws. We'll make interim corrections if necessary, but it's my intention to dedicate at least a full 6-month evaluation period to the new staffing model. Also, as I stated last month, I intend the implementation to be a collaborative effort with the labor groups, and they'll be an integral component of the evaluation of the staffing. Another item I thought would be worth mentioning today since it was present in the Hiller Hines assessment. There's certainly some distance to go, but just this week, the police department took delivery of 5 brand-new police vehicles, and I expect that we'll be taking another 5 before the end of the month. Again, we're getting there. I'm also working with the Metro Fleet staff to develop a new vehicle replacement program more suited to address the wear and tear unique to police vehicles and meet our future needs. And finally, I wanted to mention that before the end of the year, the police department, we're going to be holding a critical incident training class and a tabletop exercise for Metra and Metra staff. My Metra chiefs and director counterparts are identifying their staff members who would be the early critical decision makers in the event of an incident, and that is the target audience that we're going to have for our critical incident training. Again, I hope to have that, I will have that training done by the end of the year. I'm anticipating September, October at the latest. Again, I hope it wasn't too short, but I want to touch on a couple of the items from last month, and I know we're talking more about Hiller Hines. So I would entertain any questions if you have.
Thank you, Chief. Any questions? John?
So the training you envision is going to be HC compliant?
Yes, sir.
I would like to suggest that very possibly when you start doing that, you look at your evaluation, your evaluators, both as a function of other policing agencies. But I would, I don't know about other board members, but I'd love to be, I think it'd be a proper role for a board, for a board member or members to be part of the evaluation team for that.
Absolutely. And again, I've spoken with Don. It's going to be a full scope work. I'm targeting the early and immediate decision makers, but it will be full scope all the way through the executive director's decision level. So yeah, absolutely.
Any other questions? Oh, I'm sorry, Romaine.
Good afternoon, Chief. How soon do you think we can see a mission statement or your goal ordinance on where you're looking to take the police department once you put your plan in place and you've had your meetings with labor? How soon do you think that you're going to be able to roll something out for the board to be able to see a mission on what you're actually trying to accomplish through your manpower?
I do have a mission statement. The mission statement is done. I implemented that very shortly after I arrived. Now, if you're talking about goals and objectives of the agency, my immediate goal is to find out what my staffing is or is not, and am I meeting the calls and calls of service. Part of the evaluation process is also going to be a change in our reporting system and how we're collecting data. Unfortunately, the Metro Police Department has not done a great job in the past collecting real data, what their calls for service are and where the responses are. So that's going to be part of the 6-month process. So I will be able to give you next month some of the parameters I'm going to be looking over for the next 6 months to get an idea if the staffing model works or not. That I can present to you next month. But as far as the actual goals and where they're going to go from there, I will have that for a couple months at least.
Other questions? Thank you, Chief.
Okay, if I can ask Mr. Ken Boucher to come down from Hiller Hines and talk a little bit about some of the accomplishments and deliverables.
Mr. Chairman, board members, thank you for having me here today. Good news is, it's probably the last time you'll see me.
We all love you.
I really am pretty excited to be here. You know, we started out with a report that really brought to attention some critical issues at the Metro Police Department, and there was a lot of discussion over it. And I can't stand in front of you today, as the chief has said, and tell you that everything is fixed, but I can tell you that we're on a great path. I'm really happy with the direction that it's gone. I'm not so happy that we did well enough and we hired a chief that's good enough that you're able to cut the contract short. But the contract did end a month early, and I'd like to really quickly go through the deliverables so you understand where we are. And on our deliverables, if you remember, there was 13 of them, and I'll go through them briefly. The big part of it was leadership continuity, liaison, and onboarding for the new chief, and that continued with the first contract into the last one. And during that time frame, we had laid out a series of about 10 or 11 other deliverables that hit the key points. And I can tell you that on every one of those key points of the report and of the assessment that we did previously, that either we've completed it, or they're long-term pieces, and we've left the chief with a plan and a strategy and the ability to move forward, that he was comfortable enough in sitting down with us and with the executive director to say, you know, we have what we need, we can move forward. I'd like to hit a couple of them briefly, and as the chief said, he has a plan for staffing. It's based on a statistical analysis. It's probably 90% complete. We understand what it needs to be, and you'll be seeing that. One thing I did want to talk about is in the mission, and the one thing going from being an assessment company to actually being the interim chief, we learned a couple things that just weren't really pointed out to us in the beginning, and we probably didn't have the insight to understand. And that Metro Police has a couple of things that are really distinctly different from any police department in the country, other than those having this specific functions. And I'd say the most important one is their role in maintaining on-time training schedules. It's not something that any police department has to consider, and it's something that they do really well. When we looked at everything from monitoring grade crossings with broken gates to getting crashes moved on as quickly as possible, and looking at the impact of when they're not there and the delays that it causes, I have to say that has to be deeply embedded into their mission. That isn't really normal for police departments. And that's something that's understood. And in with that, we talked about eliminating some non-core functions. Well, some of those functions, the chief has done a good job looking at many of them, many of the security functions that can be handled by others, some that are really not relevant to policing, but some are really critical. One, for example, that it was my opinion we would eliminate immediately, that after studying and looking in more detail, is, for example, the money truck, is the most probably cost-effective way to handle that process right now until the new ticketing system's in place. Once the new ticketing system's in place, there'll be some significant cost savings. Right now, it's not possible. The second one is you're really doing it the best you can, and it really is a best practice, and that's your communication center. In an initial look, you don't need the people you have in a communication center to do the work of a police department, but you do need, are all in place. Training, especially command level training, has been identified for lieutenants, commanders, and sergeants. In the area of our comprehensive training assessment, there is no mandated training for law enforcement that's not complete, up to date, and plan to keep it complete moving forward. And that was one of the key problems that we had before, and I'm really confident that we're in a good spot there. The high liability policies. This was a lot of work. This was an area that the agency was deficient, as we talked about before. Working with the executive director, chief, and the command staff, we have implemented best practices and high liability policies, and implemented 10 policies that are currently they're in place, they're under legal review, but they're good to go, and I'm very happy with that. It's not to say that the job's over or it's easy, because it's not. There's a lot of things. There's issues with staffing that the chief will continue to contend with. There's issues with technology, but there are plans in place for all of those to continue to progress, move forward as we move into the future. So I want to end with thank you for the opportunity to let us participate with this. We're really excited about the position that the department's in and the agency is in, and the job that the chief's doing.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you for helping us find Joe, too.
Yeah.
Any questions?
Just a thank you.
Okay. Dan?
Okay, I'll just take a few minutes. I know we're running a little bit behind here. Some of the activities we have this month, myself and Director Plant, joined Senator Sandoval and Cicero Village President Larry Dominic for the Cicero Station opening. It was a great event. It's a $4.5 million project. It's opened up some parking lot areas, new station platforms, and things like that. It's very, very well received out there. It's going to help the community grow. Again, our stations are the gateways to the communities and also the access to our train system. So we've got to continue to do those things. I also participated in the freight passenger trucking industry for the WTS, which is Women in Transportation Seminar. One of our goals is to get minority candidates to not only bid on our jobs, but also come to work at Metra. We've got a team in place with Janice and Countess to try to do that. Not only in women, but all demographics of the areas that we operate in. That's really going to be important for us. We wanted the complexion of Metra to match the complexion of the community we operate through. I attended the Hispanic Construction Industry Association's networking seminar. Along with myself, we had the heads from IDOT, a lot of the county and city commissioners, the CEO of Total System, and we talked about a lot of different initiatives that we're doing, projects that were coming up, and we were able to ask questions. If you have never been to a CEO event, it really is amazing. A lot of people attend those, and it's very, very worthwhile. Chairman Oberman, Norm Carlson, and also Director Plant, myself, attended the ribbon cutting ceremony with Governor Quinn and Senator Durbin on the UP to talk about the work that we're going to be doing on the UP West Line, the addition of the third lane, and also the Belgian station, things like that. That's going to be very, very important for us because, as everybody knows, the freight industry is growing. That was funded through IDOT. It was the Union Pacific and IDOT also there. The President Lance Fritz was there. It's just going to be great for us to have opportunities to have more throughput in there, and also maybe realize, like the BN has right now, where you have a lot of express service, where we can get some express trains and do things like that. And it's also very beneficial whenever we have an accident or any type of mechanical problem or anything like that on your recovery. If you've got through 3 tracks all the way through, there's a lot more flexibility to do that. Lastly, the last 2 days, Tuesday and Wednesday, the last 2 days, I was in Washington, D.C. We met with senators and congressional representatives and things, talking about Metra's needs, Metra's concerns, the funding problems that we have, the PTC issues, just keeping them in the loop of what the challenges Metra faces. Again, if you're not there, the squeaky wheel gets hurt, and I want to be a squeaky wheel. And my hat's off to our team, our government affairs team, and our actually legislative team that we have in Washington, D.C., and also the stateside, because without all of the efforts, it'd be very hard for us to do the things that we're doing. I think we're moving forward anyway. Basically, that wraps up what I've been doing. Not much, but it does wrap it up.
Gotta stop slacking off, Don. Any questions for Don? I just say again, every day I'm grateful for the fact that this board was wise enough to put you in this position. At this time, I ask for a motion to recess to close the executive session. I'm sorry.
Very brief point of personal privilege.
Yes.
Thank you. I stand today in recognition of Director Mulder's last meeting, but it was the last meeting. Arlene, you were mayor of Arlington Heights for 20 years? For 20 years. And in that time, both at Arlington Heights as well as Metra, she interacted with many, many, many mayors during that time frame. I've seen many of those same mayors, and they wanted me to thank you for all you've done. One of them gave me a very unique request, and that was to provide you with a gift. Now, this particular mayor, Jack and I know very well, is the mayor of Naperville, George Cradle, and he's been mayor, I believe, about 20 years as well. So he wanted me to present you with a Mayor George Cradle bobblehead. And that's a gift of your great service and great friendship to the folks of Naperville. So Arlene, thank you so much.
Not the case.
Thank you very much.
John, that he is overstocked.
That could be the case.
Well, Arlene, once again, we're not quite done yet because we've got executive session, but everybody is grateful for your dedicated service. We will miss you. At this time, I ask for a motion to recess to close the executive session for matters relating to sections 2C21, 1, 5, 8, and 29 of the Open Meetings Act for the purpose of board consideration of review and approval of the closed session minutes, discussion on the appointment, employment, compensation, and performance of specific personnel, purchase or lease of real estate, security, and meeting with the external auditors of the Audit and Finance Committee as a whole to discuss internal controls.
I so move.
Second. All in favor?